when that child goes to tell, and they have a safe place to tell, and something good happens, the abuse stops, that is the person who is going to have the most optimum outcome in adulthood. There are children who have been sexually abused and have almost no symptoms in adulthood because they told, and when they told, something was done about it. Even when it's violent sexual assault. But because their needs were properly addressed, because they knew that and understood that, then in adulthood they may have the least amount of symptoms than someone who even was only molested, right? It's not the part that you were only molested, it's the fact that somehow you had to cloak this secret and hide it from someone because there was no room for error in that household. It could be much more traumatic. It's not always the specific event, is what is all the environment, the nurturing that tells a person how to experience that event, right? So that in an optimal family, there has to be room for error in order for your children to see you as a go-to person, right? Children play freely. They play. Like oftentimes, there's no room for play because I'm keeping you safe. You must do this, you must do that, da, da, da. So there's, rarely room for play. Play for a lot of adults who experience trauma, play looks like excessive vulnerability. Right? You're not serious enough. You know that there's a dangerous world out there. Too much play is not good for you. It makes you vulnerable.
You're distracted.
Right, you're distracted. Right, so I keep you busy. Right, so I know you're thinking. You're not going to be caught off guard. Too much play does not happen. In optimal families, there is room for play and laughter. Like life feels light, not like we're always under attack. And that's kind of what you were talking about too, right? Like there's just this current sense of anxiety and something could go wrong anytime, so stay on guard, right? Adult and child roles are delineated in optimal families. This is what adults do. There's a lane for adults, and this is what children do. Oftentimes, in many families who have not addressed issues, they don't even understand the difference between roles of adults and roles of children. They become very blended, right? And that has happened. That's a common scenario for adults who have experienced childhood sexual abuse, right? Sometimes what happens is that the abuse occurs in a very distorted way because an adult is not taking on their role or responsibility. It's amazing how many stories I have heard about mothers who knew that their daughters were being sexually violated by their partners. So there was no difference between what a child does and what an adult does. And somehow someone sees it as okay. Maybe that's how the generation before was, or the generation before. So there's no blending, there's no understanding in that family that, oh, you're 8 years old or 10 years old, you shouldn't be the sexual object of this adult person in the house. Like there's no delineating roles between adults. And so people don't see the possibility of children being violated because there's no delineating roles. So now we have adult survivors, we keep them safe, we're not gonna let that happen, but still there's not clear delineating roles. So now it's not about sex, no, I'm keeping you safe, that's not happening, but there are other roles that get blurred between adults and children. So 8-year-olds are babysitting 2-year-olds. They're taking on parenting responsibility for 2-year-olds because there's no play. Life is serious, right? And you do the same things that I do. You're 8 years old and you have the responsibility of a 28-year-old. That occurs, that's common, right? It's not that you're giving these responsibilities to help you grow and develop, but you're given these responsibilities because I don't see these delineating lines between being an adult and being a child, right? So it may be about chores, may be about responsibilities, or it may be that you're permissive, you don't have a bedtime, because it's all just blended in. Roles are not delineated, right? Or you're taking care of my emotional needs instead of me taking care of your emotional needs, right? That's the other common experience you see with adult survivors and with their children. Children learn to take care of their adult needs. So one, we talked before a minute ago about no room forever, so I'm not gonna tell. And probably the number two issue is that I didn't tell because I didn't want to create a problem. I didn't want to disturb my parents. I didn't want them to fight anymore. I didn't want, right? So my response in the world is my responsibility to take care of my caregiver's needs instead of having my own needs met, right? Blurring those lines. So in optimal families, they're delineating lines. This is what children do. This is what adults do, right? Okay. So how does it help to live openly? So and you asked the question, well, how much do we talk with our clients about this, or our friends about this, or our household members about this? How much can they even accept? So the living openly idea is my own theory that I've really been defining since 2010 when I discovered, like I said, what does it mean to live openly? You can't, because you cannot hide and heal at the same time. So when I began my own healing journey again, I think that was the third time, and really trying to figure this out, what does this path look like? And how do you silence 60 million people? And if 60 million people are silenced, and how do you unsilence them? And so really trying to bring some clarity to what does it mean to live openly. And so that's what I've been working on for the last 10 years. So we're gonna talk more about what that looks like. What occurred to me, even before I could even clearly articulate what does it mean to live openly, I understood that it meant dropping the secret. That's all I knew. I didn't know what that looked like, but I knew it meant dropping the secret. That all the pain that I was experiencing was really a direct result of me trying to hide this secret. And I had no idea, really, because I'm just living. It feels like I'm just living. I didn't realize or count to myself or say to myself, oh my goodness, I'm doing this and this and this. All these things are connected. Like there's like 100 dots in between healing and hiding. All these behaviors are connected to me trying to hide this secret. All these patterns of living that I'm doing that look really good and cool on the outside is really about me hiding this experience. But meanwhile, epigenetics is catching up with me, right? And the internal festering is bubbling to the top, and I can't do it anymore. And so then what does it look like to heal out loud? And so I began to develop this process for people to do that and begin to have some understanding of exactly what it is that's gonna happen. So one of the first things that happened is I began to live openly, and I began to drop this secret by just simply having conversations with people who knew me, who I could trust, not with the secret, because I didn't care about the secret anymore. So, because here's what happens first for many survivors who decide to disclose. There's a difference between dropping a secret and living openly and disclosure. Those are two different things. So when I disclosed, because I had disclosed before, which means, oh my God, I'm having pain and this is what happened to me. And bottom line is always, don't tell anyone. So this is what I hear survivors say all the time, but who can you trust? I'm like, trust with what? Trust yourself. Are you disclosing or are you dropping the secret? Because what happens when I tell you and I say don't tell anyone, and I tell you and I say don't tell anyone, and I tell you and don't tell anyone, all I've done really is gotten a whole lot of support for my lies, right? Which is the worst, but I didn't know that, right? That's just the worst. Like one of the most painful experiences about coming to live openly was when I realized how many So that's disclosure. That's the scary part about the Me Too movement that wasn't supposed to happen like that at all. That's very separate from what the original Tarana Burke had intended. But what we did was all these people going around having these disclosures, and nothing is set forth for people to move forward in their lives, right? So that's very different than living openly with intention of healing. So when we live openly, we drop the secret. And it's not even about then telling details of what happened to you, et cetera, et cetera. It just means you take away your commitment to keeping this secret. When appropriate, you disclose whatever part of your life that is related to that is appropriate. It's rarely appropriate for you to say, at age 2, this happened, and blah, 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 and here I am at age 22, right? Like, rarely is that, I mean, that may be a conversation with your therapist or with your spouse or with somebody, but rarely do I find a need that's what's needed in this instance. It occurs at some point, but for that to just be your healing path, the healing journey, probably because all you're doing is externalizing everything. It's not where the healing takes place, right? So when we talk about living openly, we're talking about healing out loud, not disclosing and telling a story. We're talking about healing out loud, dropping the secret, letting go of the protections of the people who are attached to the secret so that you can heal out loud. So every now and again, I'm in a room with someone and a conversation is taking place, and I say something simply like, well, as a survivor, this is what I hear. What you're saying doesn't make sense, or it's not relevant, or it's harmful. That's all I say. I don't say, well, that didn't happen, that didn't work for me because when I was 7 years old, this happened. Like, no, I just dropped the secret of living around being afraid of people knowing that I'm a survivor. If I'm in a conversation, one-on-one or small groups or whatever, and someone is in whatever the conversation is, or somebody asks me a question, I might say, oh yeah, at this age, or oh yeah, this person was involved. I may give some details, but living openly is not about letting go of the details. In fact, it's quite the contrary. It's about how do you then live openly and have boundaries at the same time, right? That's important. I remember, I think it was like maybe 2 Father's Day, and I've been doing this work, like I said, since out loud since 2010. And like I said, rarely do I stand up and say, this is my story and this is what happened to me in this linear order. Rarely do I feel the need to do that. I've never done that publicly, in fact. But I do the work, and I live openly as an incest survivor. And so I don't know if you remember this, Sarah, or not, but I think it's like maybe 2 Father's Day ago, I posted online like this short little poem I had written to my dad about how when he died and the lessons that I learned from him. But he wasn't I learned a lot of lessons from him, but he also had his own issues. And so the poem was something like that. Like I appreciate the values that you taught me, and I love you and I miss you, even though you weren't this perfect man, right? And so I have this online Facebook Adult Survivor, Talking Trees Online, 7,000 members, and a lot of them are on my Facebook page, my regular page. And so I wrote that on Father's Day, and I got all these survivors like, oh, you don't have to pretend, and if he was a horrible, and I was like, whoa, like it was like flooding, and I was like, whoa, my father was not my violator. Like he was not. It's like he was not necessarily an upstanding man, but one thing I can attest to is that I was never sexually abused by my father. Like, let's get this straight. And I don't like having to say who I was or wasn't, but it was like this. But because I had done this work for so long, like people, and it let me because I had never publicly said, oh, this person did or did not sexually abuse me. Those are not part of the conversation, but it was interesting. So I had to then go on and just say, my father had nothing to do with my violation. He was just not always a kind person, although he was to me. most of the time, but that doesn't mean that he was a kind person in the world. But it was really weird that I had to go on and like explain this, on social media because people really did not know. I'm like, well, you can read the book, like all of them are listed by name in the book. Like you can read the book, it's not a secret. I'm not trying to hide, but I also have boundaries around my personal life and experience, and like it or not, for better or for worse, that is part of a sexual history, and no more than anybody else should just go out and blurting out all their sexual history, neither should survivors. You don't owe that to anyone, right? So living openly is not about disclosing every detail of your experiences. So what are some of the things that it does? It's really a campaign for all adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse. And the benefits that you get is that when you live openly, you have access to information that you otherwise do not have access to. Until I started to live openly, none of the information that I told you would I have had. None of it. None of it. So all this relevant information that you need for healing, you don't have access to. Because all you have are the voices in your head, the narratives given to you by your violators or your enablers. Because you're not having conversation with anyone. You're not processing information, right? And so living openly, I think somebody was saying before, you actually get to have these conversations, you actually get to dialogue with people. Someone actually gets to challenge you when you say silly things like, but what if I liked it? What do you mean? Tell me about that. Because those are the only words that you have. They're the only words that you ever came up with, right? Until someone said, but when you say it out loud, somebody goes, well, that's like, how old were you? Oh, I was 7 years old. Well, what did you like? Well, I got a lot of attention and we did special things together, blah, blah, blah. I said, that's great. You know what? Every child deserves that. Without having to be used as a sexual object. Like those are things that you are absolutely entitled to without anyone using you as a sexual object. But you've never had that conversation out loud. You're hiding that. You're hiding the fact that you liked it, which is completely irrelevant. You didn't like being sexually abused. Yes, you like the same thing that every 7-year-old likes. Attention, feeling valued, feeling trusted. Like, of course you liked it. You didn't like the sexual abuse, you liked it. Let's define it, right? But you never say those sentences out loud, so no one ever gets to challenge you. No one ever gets to offer you information to create a healthy narrative around that, right? So living openly gives you access to information. And then you get support for living openly in whatever that journey is for you. So that's what Talking Trees has been about for the last 10 years. So let's look at the living openly model, and I don't know how much time we got. We'll go over these kind of quick. You can ask plenty of questions. Finally, a year or so ago, I actually formulated the components of the living openly model. And it looks like something like this. The whole purpose is to go from survivor to thriver. So you don't have to just stop at, okay, I live openly. Living openly is not the goal. Living openly is a journey. It's not the goal. It's like, oh, but I tell people now and people know. If you stop there, just, oh, I don't have to carry this secret anymore, but you don't begin to heal and engage in the healing patterns, then you've kind of missed the point. You're going to be stuck at survivor and you can't get to thriving. Getting to thriving is the journey, and it's a lifelong journey, right? And so that's ultimately what we want in order to restructure the epigenetics, right? Because I can acknowledge myself as a survivor. It doesn't take away the anxiety. It doesn't teach me how to reconstruct relationships, right? So and it doesn't teach me how to parent. So those are the issues that are really important, and so we want to learn. So these are the 5 components that I'm really trying to get all practitioners to adopt in working with adult survivors, right? To move them along and get them committed to the healing journey. So one is identity education. And that is the idea of just accepting yourself as a survivor of whatever it is, whether it's mental abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, of childhood, whatever. When you can identify as something, it gives you community and it gives you permission to heal. It's not intended to be a badge, and that's real important. Again, because this is not the end goal. I get to be, I'm an adult survivor of childhood sexual abuse, and that's it. I just sit in a chair and I be that. There's a purpose. The purpose is to find your tribe, find your community, identify yourself, and then you have that soft landing where, oh, right, that's what I'm still working on. Not beat yourself up. It's not a badge for anyone else to beat you up either. And so as we were talking in the Survivors Only session last night, a very important phrase to use or give to those that you're working with, because you're working on this stuff and being able to acknowledge, I'm a survivor, I'm working on this. And the other half of that is to be able to say to people, I can't work on this if you use it against me. I can't work on it if you use it against me. If every time we get into an argument, you throw it in my face, I can't work on it. Right? Because that's just gonna put me back in protection and hiding mode. You have to, the whole purpose of trying to invite you into this journey is so I can feel some sense of grace and support in this relationship. I can't work on it if you use it against me. So you can decide what that looks like for us, but every time it comes out, if I'm hurt and shattered, every time a piece of it comes out, I can't work on it. Will you help me with this piece? Right? So having that identity is for the purpose of healing, not for the purpose of having to hide again. Right? Removing the isolation, we already kind of talked about that earlier, right? Because you're hiding. Capitalizing on resilience is critical because we made it this far. Like whatever condition you're in, if someone made it to your office, someone made it to the Talking Trees page, someone made it to my inbox, they've already survived. Like I already assume you are a survivor, although every now and then you get people who are really still steeped in literally in victimization. I literally could mention at least 3 people that I know who are in their 40s and 50s who literally never stopped being sexually abused, or are literally now currently in relationships with people who had started abusing them since they were in childhood. That doesn't, it happens. I'm not gonna say it's rare, it happens, but that's not the most common situation. Usually by the time you get to me, you've done some work, no matter what. Like you've made it here, I assume you're already a survivor. The abuse is behind you and you've built up some resilience. Now let's see where it's taking over your life and how to go from there. So we capitalize on resilience, not on victimization. So again, it's not about come and tell all the, like just vomit everything that's ever been done to you. Like I assure you, unfortunately, every time, and sometimes people need to do that. So sometimes people will inbox me their whole story, like their whole entire, and that's part of what I do. Like this is the space for you to do that. I'd rather you do it here than go out in the street and just do it on your Facebook page, right? So that's a safe space to do that. And what I respond back to them as I first recognize and thank them for using that safe space and assure them that they've been heard. And then my next line is that I do not mean for this to sound insensitive in any way. I wish that I would read this and say, oh my God, this is the worst thing that has ever happened. It's not. But you've never spoken these words, so it feels like the worst thing that has, and it is the worst thing that has ever happened to you. But I wish I could tell you it was the worst thing that has ever happened. But the stories get more and more horrific. The things that we have survived is absolutely unthinkable, right? From who knows to who the violator is to what people ask you to do with it. There are some horrific stories out there, right? So knowing that you are not alone and that if you've made it this far, you've made it based on your own resilience. So this idea that you don't know what to do or you can't do it is not true. You've already done it. We're just about picking up the pieces and doing it better from here. So always starting with people from a position of resilience. What are you already bringing? What tools are already in your toolbox? I'm not trying to start from scratch with anybody. You know, no matter how horrible of a situation it is, you've got skills in those bags already. How can we capitalize on them, right? So that's hugely important when we're talking about living openly. So our goal is to help people improve their navigation on a healing journey. It's not to dictate it, it's to help them improve their navigation. Where are your sore spots today? Because it's gonna change, because you're on a journey, right? The trip is gonna look different, the scenery is gonna change, who's in the scene is gonna change, your responses to the scenery, it's all gonna change as you go along the healing path. We're just here to help you navigate. We're the backseat drivers, right? That's all we're here to do. You get to have that support. And then, of course, this is an important piece, is encouraging advocacy. And that's a big piece when talking trees. Part of what happens is that this sense of isolation that survivors carry is really deep. And so if I can get survivors to understand what's happening in the world in the big picture and get them to be advocates for humanity, it sort of becomes a soft cushion of blow. Because what happens for many survivors is this idea that this thing happened to me. And it did happen to you, but you are a part of 60 million people. There's not something wrong with you, there's something wrong with the world. It's not even personal. Once I really began to understand and accept, oh, there's nothing wrong with me, there's something wrong with the world, then you begin to do your advocacy, right? And as you grow, you encourage the world. As you encourage the world, you grow. You have this two-pronged thing, and it actually helps, not in a way that distracts you from your work, but in a way that supports your work, right? Because then I know it's not about me, it's about how do I create new patterns in the world so that we can restructure these epigenetic happenings. And so getting people involved in advocacy work. What does it look like? Like I said, we have 7,000 people in Talking Trees, and every now and again I'll say to them, why, in reality, why do I care if you heal or not? What does that have to do with me? I wish I were, but I am not so altruistic that it really matters to me whether you as an individual heal. I'm not that altruistic. My commitment to service and humanity is because I firmly believe that if I can assist you in your healing, you are gonna assist somebody else. If I don't have that belief, I have no interest at all in helping you heal, because it'll never get back around to me, right? So part of Talking Trees is about not just teaching you how to heal, but how to live better in the world so that the world can heal. Does that make sense? Right? So I think advocacy work is a huge part of helping people heal. Right? So that's a huge component of Talking Trees. Any questions about Living Openly model? So this is what I teach and train and that sort of stuff, and trying to get new theories into the textbook about how change happens. You know, for us to be therapists, and therapists don't like when I say this, to just have people come in our office and sit for weeks on time and years on time and listen to people talk about what happened to them, puts money in your pocket but doesn't change the world, right? How do you actually help people move on? What model are you actually using? And there is no model out there for working with adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse, right? We talk about trauma-informed training. It's not the same thing. So this is the model that I'm trying to advance to help people address issues of childhood sexual abuse. To just have someone sit in your office every week and you're not connecting them to communities, and you're not talking to them about epigenetics, and you're not helping them create a healthy survivor identity, and all they do is come and spill out information about their narratives, is probably, you're gonna be seeing them for a long time. And even if you help them, the world will not change. It will not change our epigenetics. It will not filter down to the next generation. Does that make sense? So I'm trying to create a model that I think has the potential to change in a real way what happens in this next generation.
Earlier when you said improved navigation, as therapists, you're saying like we would sit in the back seat and kind of let them take the reins of it. We give them the tools, we explain like epigenetics, give them the homework to kind of look it up and do their research and then come back to talk about it. So not that they're just constantly talking about their story, but they're also figuring out like epigenetics and how to tie it in. Is that what you're saying?
Right, and whatever, yes. So the short answer is yes. And so how you improve navigation depends on what your role is with them. Like, are you a sit-down talk therapist, or are you just running a parenting program where you have more lines, or are you working in after-school programs? Or so it depends on what specific role that you have with them, but not taking away their power by saying, "Oh, I know what you need to fix yourself," but really empowering them, just like you said, empowering them to understand where are you in this long line of healing and experiences of childhood sexual abuse. Like, where are you? Are you, and if you're not a parent yet, hey, here's some good stuff to look at so we can prepare for some preventative stuff. If you have adult children already, right, then you're starting at a completely different place on that agenda, but here's some ways that you might still improve those relationships with your children, right? Even if they're good relationships, it doesn't necessarily mean they're optimal relationships, right? Good based on what? And so you help them navigate the healing journey, and you, most importantly, I think, is being a soft landing, because the same thing we say, make for good parenting, make for good caregivers, when we're practicing. So is it a space where they can make mistakes, right? Where you teach them to navigate, oh, you did that, I didn't feel too good, what happened? Like, yeah, we talked about that, you were gonna not yell at your children next time, but you did, and that's okay. Let's talk about where that came from. Did that help? No, now my kids aren't talking to me, and that makes things even worse, right? Okay, that's all right, because that's what you're working on. There's room for error, there's room for discussion. Doesn't make you a bad person. Were you in a healing journey? Let's talk about why you keep losing it every time your child says that one thing that they know is gonna make you lose it, right? What is that thing? So helping them navigate this journey, being that soft landing for them, providing them with information or resources that they can get to the next space, but recognizing that they may be at this space right here for longer than what you like or think that they should be there, right? Because sometimes we don't see the growth that's happening, right? It's like, you plant a flower and you're like, it's not there, it's not there, it's not there. Or you buy that lily, near Easter, and you keep looking for it to bloom, and it never blooms while you're looking at it. Then you come home one day and like, oh, where'd that come from, right?